Dave in Radcliffe, Kentucky. It's time for something to change. Hey, Dave, thanks for listening to Sirius. What's up?
Hey, Tom, this is a history question. I listen to these Republicans talk, and these conservatives also, for that matter, and they always claim to really admire the founders, and they claim to kind of, politically speaking, inherited the legacy of the founders of this country. But I remember reading, particularly Thomas Jefferson, that a lot of the founders really supported separation of church and state, even some of the religious ones, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So we would stay unentangled in the religious wars of Europe. I was wondering if you know of any, like, a concise book or whatever that addresses that topic.
I don't. I've never gone looking for a book on that topic, but I have written about that topic. If you Google my name in quotes and Judge Moore in quotes, you will come up with an article that I wrote back 6-8 years ago when Judge Moore down in Alabama, I think, wanted to put the 10 Commandments on the courthouse steps. And it's filled with quotes from the founders, essentially saying, we are not a Christian nation. We're not going to have an official religion. If you want a couple of just very, bright and clear examples, Thomas Jefferson, who was somewhere between an atheist, he called himself a deist. Deists believed, I don't know if there's modern day deism, but it was very popular during his time. In fact, there are some who suggest that maybe even a large minority or a small majority of the founders, the framers, the people who signed the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were deists. And deists believe that there was some, at the creation of the universe, there was some sort of intelligence that essentially said, let it all come into being, or that became everything that is. And then it stepped back. And that there is no, according to the deists, according to Thomas Jefferson, there is no, old man in a beard who's micromanaging everybody's life and taking care of everything that gets done by everybody. And so, today we'd probably call that an atheist with a scientific background or something. Whereas James Madison was a Christian. He was explicitly and overtly a Christian. I don't remember if he was Presbyterian or Congregationalist, but it was one or the other. And he was Jefferson's protege. And he and Jefferson had a really fascinating correspondence back when, around the time of the writing of the Constitution, which you can find in Jefferson's letters fairly easily. And basically what Jefferson was saying is, we have to we have to put a wall of separation. In fact, that phrase came from this correspondence, the wall of separation between church and state. It doesn't appear in any of our founding documents. It was in the correspondence between Jefferson and Madison on this topic. And Jefferson was saying, we've got to keep priests, meaning ministers as well, Protestant ministers, from running for political office. Because if they gain power, political power, they will turn our government into something that we don't intend it to be. He never had any success with that, and he really didn't even push it. It was more just his comments to Madison. He never suggested legislation to that effect, but he was very concerned about it. Madison, on the other hand, sends back to Jefferson, says, I really don't think you have to worry about ministers in government. Keep in mind, Madison was the Christian. Madison says, I don't think you have to worry about ministers in government. They will, or priests or preachers, they'll comport themselves appropriately, and the people will keep them in check. However, what we do have to worry about is if the government ever starts giving money to the churches, then the churches will be corrupted by that government money, and they will forget their mission of preaching the gospel and helping the poor, and they will become basically wards of the state, and they will begin to behave in ways that will get them more and more money from the government, and you'll have you will corrupt the churches as well as the government. And Madison, was concerned about corrupting both. The two of them argued about this for maybe a year. And then, they moved on to other topics. So that's like the first act of the play. The second act of the play is when James Madison becomes president. And again, you can easily find this, with a search engine. When James Madison became president, in the first few months of his presidency, during the three prior presidents, he was the fourth president of the United States. We had George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and then James Madison. And when Madison became president, for the three prior presidencies, poor people in Washington, D.C., which is D.C. is the ward of the federal government. The federal government is responsible for the budgets of Washington, D.C., still is. Poor people in Washington, D.C., and this was put into law in the first year of the George Washington administration. The poorhouses in Washington, D.C. were paid for directly by the government. And the poorhouses provided medical care, they provided clothing, they provided food, and they provided housing to what were referred to then as paupers, to very poor people, and as well as disabled people and indigent people who were poor because of their disabilities and didn't have a family that could care for them. In the first couple of months of the Madison administration, some good Christian in Congress wrote a law, and coincidental with with James Madison becoming president in 1809. There was a religious revival happening in the United States in the first 3 decades of the 19th century, of the 1800s, and a major religious revival, and a Protestant Christian religious revival. And so the Congress actually passed a law, it passed both the House and the Senate, that said that going forward, the money for the poorhouses in Washington, D.C. would be given to D.C. churches, and the churches would administer the poorhouses. And that was the first veto by James Madison as President of the United States. And in his veto message, which you can read online very easily, he says, if I don't veto this legislation will establish a precedent for the government giving money to the churches, which will corrupt the churches and the government. I will not allow it. And he did not allow it throughout the 8 years of his presidency. And, that was the end of that. So those are some starting points, Dave, some threads you can pull on if you want, if you're going to debate this with somebody over the holidays or whatever. Dave, I got to move along. Thank you for the call. Thanks for getting me off on a topic that I'm fond of and familiar with. To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.